production for the community. And as well as the way she has mentioned, this community, I've been following all the other YouTube channels, right? We've been going through all AI, data, open AI. And in fact, last week there was an augmentation session, right? So we wanted to give a different flavor, as Fatma mentioned. We wanted to take you to a journey of what is there on the other side as in infrastructure. Thank you very much, Adi, as well. So topic here today is the cloud adoption framework. Of course, before we get into this framework, we'll give our introduction. As Fatma rightly mentioned, we both have been working into this industry for more than 18 plus, like around 20 years of experience, worked with companies like Wipro, HP, LTI, Microsoft. So these are different companies, and we both have traveled to various different regions as well, US, Europe, and now in the Middle East. Our primary focus is to onboard different customers, organizations to cloud. That's our focus, right? So that's a quick introduction about both of us, and this is our passion. We want to grow cloud community across this region, right? Would you want to add anything?
No, I think with respect to a lot of information that we see nowadays, most people are talking about the applications, AI, generative AI, the RAG and everything, right? All applications. But I think it's very important to understand the underlying infrastructure as well, right? Because without infrastructure, we are not able to run all these things, right? So that's where we are at actually. So,
all right. So let's get into the topic. But then, before getting into the topic, just a quick question. I know a couple of them are from university, a couple of them are experienced. Just want to understand, is there any developer here? All right. All of them are from infrastructure background? No? Okay. Anyone who already have worked on Azure cloud from an infrastructure perspective? Perfect. Perfect. Thank you. Right. Now, for the people those who have already worked on cloud for a couple of years, right? You would know there are always been an adoption drivers as well as challenges, right? So in terms of drivers and challenges, what we need to understand is now cloud is no more a choice for us, right? It has become mandatory for us, right? In terms of any business which is going through a transformation, whether it is a business transformation or a digital transformation, cloud has become a must kind of a solution for them, right? And to support them, what's happening is there are a lot of all right. To support them, we could see that the government itself, most of the Middle East government itself, are making a cloud initiative frameworks, right? That's an important point where Qatar, Saudi, Dubai, all of these government have released a framework where they've asked mandatorily you have to go to cloud, right? Unless you prove that you do not want to go to cloud and you want to keep your application or a VM or a workload back into on-prem. So that's one of the major driver, I would say, in this particular region. Other than the normal drivers, of course, you want to onboard into a Gen AI, you want to explore the multi-cloud option, you want to explore being more competitive. While there are multiple drivers, there are also challenges with them, right? And there have been usual challenges. Data security, managing complexity, compliance and regulation, cost management, skill expertise. Okay, and there are more. Sustainability. These are just few of the challenges. Anyone have any experience from the people, those are from IT industry, have gone through these challenges? Yes, sir. Any experience that you want to share?
No, the main question will comes around about the data security. And of course, the outbound traffic is going to internet. So the security want to filter it out and they want to inspect something. So, and then we so many times we don't see the actual value of the cloud.
Okay. All right. If anyone else want to share your experience?
Sometimes there are people challenges also. People don't want to lose control of the data or the applications. They feel if they move to cloud, they lose the control.
They also felt like if everything goes to cloud, what will happen to my job? Right? That was also one of the major concern that people had to go through. And of course, that's the same experience or same feelings now with an AI. If everything is being done through an AI, right? What are the engineers going to do? Of course. Anyhow, this is a question which has been repeated in all the different era. I believe maybe when computer was introduced, when automation was introduced, like if everything is going to be automated, what am I going to do? If everything is going to cloud, what am I going to do? Right? So the experience says based on the history, in terms of those job roles, there will be new job roles which will come, and we have to adopt the change, else we'll be changed. That's very simple, right? Now, coming back to the cloud adoption challenges, for all of these challenges, there need a solution. And for those solutions, there are roles, and those roles are something which a cloud solution architect, cloud engineer, cloud SMEs play a role where they can go ahead and help the customers to come out of these challenges. Right? But those cloud architects, engineers, SMEs, or even for that matter, even the customers themselves need a set of guidance to come out of these challenges. Correct? They need best practices, they need recommendations, tools, templates, learning experience, all of them. Right? And that's where most of the cloud, especially if I'm talking about Microsoft, they've worked with their internal and external partners and customers with their learning experience. They've developed a comprehensive guidance, right? And that's what is called as cloud adoption framework. So a one place solution where you can find all kind of recommendation, tools, templates, and entire process. Especially the point that you talked about, right? The people challenge, right? We have a solution in CAF. So this is what I was talking about. Cloud adoption framework provides a complete guidance with the best practices, documentations, tools, and templates to solve the problem of people, process, and technology. And now we are going to understand how we are going to use this guidance. There are a lot of materials available, but then today the topic is how we are going to use it. We're going to get started to this particular framework. Okay. Now, there are important aspect which is speed versus control. Now, this is the challenge which is there in every technology. People want to adopt as soon as it comes. People want to go into AI as soon as it comes. People want to take cloud as soon as it comes, but then they don't think about the control. They all of them want to take it ASAP, but then how about the governance? How about how are you going to operate it? How are you going to manage it? Right? So this framework will help us to understand a step-by-step process in the cloud adoption journey. Okay. All right. Now, before we get into there in terms of a journey, let's try to understand a couple of questions. Now, why do we want to go to cloud? First of all, the senior folks.
Scalability.
Scalability.
Cost optimization.
Cost optimization.
Security. Availability.
Data security. Availability. Now, think from a business perspective. You all have answered from a technical perspective. Think from a business perspective. Why do you want to go to cloud?
Cheaper.
Cost, cheaper,
Reduce time to market. Tap into some various technology.
to reduce time to market, right? And then adopt latest technologies. Correct? Now, these are different motivations which need to be identified. Correct? For you to identify, you need to understand the company that you're working with. You need to understand the company's business goals and objectives, right? See, we are not going to adopt a technology just because it is being released in the market. We need to adopt a technology to solve a problem, a real problem. For example, if you are working in a company, that means we are trying to solve their business problem, right? Are we adopting a technology because it is released, or are we adopting the technology which will solve the business problem, right? From a technical perspective, we all understand the technical things that it will solve: scalability, performance, all of them. But think from a larger aspect, from a business perspective, everything has to roll back and align to a business goal. You're with me, right? If I'm running a business and if I have to go to cloud, I need to first understand what will I get by going to cloud, right? So that's something first, as a first point, we need to be aligned on that. We need to understand the strategy of that company. We need to understand what motivates or what is the reason why this company need to go to cloud or want to go to cloud, right? Once we clarify this strategy, we understand the roadmap, then we come to the next point, as in what. All right, now we have made a decision that we want to go to cloud, right? Now, what all things will go to cloud? Is it entire data center will go to cloud? What's the plan, right? We need to have a plan over there. We need to understand maybe a certain set of environment will go to cloud, or maybe we adopt a certain modernization services of cloud, right? We need to have that plan, correct? And the moment we know what, then we will understand where are we going to land. So now first is we've understood, we are trying to understand why we want to go to cloud, then what we want to take it to cloud, third, where we want to land, correct? The fourth one, how we are going to land. We understood where we're going to land. Now, how we are going to land? There has to be a multiple options for us to go, right? So that is something we are going to identify. Once we have landed, then we are going to set the rules. We're going to set the rules at home. What we will do, what we will not do. Do we want to keep the lights on 24/7? Correct? That's the rules. And the last thing in that particular area is, are we following the rules? Do you agree? I'm not talking from a CAF point of view. I'm just talking from a journey point of view. Are we following the rules? Okay. All of these journey have to be secure. All of these journey have to be completely secure.
See, I just want to add a layman example to this. You can consider moving a house. So your current rented house, you plan to move, but there could be a reason why you want to move, right? Maybe the next house you want to move, the rent is cheaper, right? So there is some motivation to it. And then if, say, for example, you want to move, so what do you want to move, right, from your house? Like whether you want to move all your furniture, you want to go with the existing furniture, you want to buy a new furniture. And if you decide to take what you want, then of course you decide the destination, right, where you want to move your house, and then how you are going to do it. You are going to do it yourself, or you are going to call your friends, or whether you are going to call a transport company. So in that aspect.
So just align those questions with the actual cloud adoption framework phases. There are different phases of cloud adoption framework, right? Each phases will help you to solve questions. The first phase starts with strategy, that how we're going to understand strategy. For us, we need to look at the business goals. Okay, that's the first point that we talked about. Strategy will help you to align your requirement, to define your vision, mission, objectives. It will help you to align with your stakeholders. Right? Second point is the plan. That's where we're going to understand or get into the on-ground discovery of your environment. That's where we're going to understand how many number of VMs I have, what are the different type of applications I have, is it IIS, is it Java, is it .NET, correct? And then in the ready phase is where we're going to do an actual technical implementation of an Azure landing zone. Of course, we'll talk in detail to a certain extent in today's session, right? Where we will understand in each phases how different things are being performed. And then we go to adopt. That's where we're going to understand what is the structure of whether we want to do a migrate, modernize, or innovate. Okay. And then we'll be talking about the governance, which will be followed with manage, and then secure. Okay. Any questions? All right. Now, couple of basic points which I wanted to take you through. First of all, the cloud adoption framework is a very huge topic. Okay. We may not be able to cover all the aspects of cloud adoption framework in an hour. Okay. So we're going to give a get started for today's session. Number one. Number two, of course, we have seen it's a modular approach. At the same time, what you need to understand is it is also an iterative approach. You can anytime go back, look at the module or look at the particular phase and come back again. All right. Third, this is a guidance that is available that you go refer based on your requirement. You take those recommendations and implement. That's the experience that you need to bring by looking at this document. All right. Fourth, it is always live. Please don't keep the CAF document downloaded and start using it. It is always live. Even in the month of January 2025, there was a lot of fresh articles which was released, which is aligned with AI CAF or CAF for AI. So people, those who are trying to adopt artificial intelligence, you have a CAF for them. How do you adopt it? How do you select a use case? Right? What is CAF? Cloud Adoption Framework. So I'm just using a short form of it. Sorry if I didn't mention that earlier. I'll do that, yeah. Any questions, sir? Okay. Now, couple of key things that which I want to highlight again is number one, when we go to the CAF document, which we will go surely, it is also defined in a different scenarios. For example, you want to adopt AI, there is a certain section for AI. If you are talking about an hybrid cloud, there is a section for it. If you're talking about SAP on cloud, there is a section for that. If you're talking about Azure VMware solution of cloud, there's a section for that. Right? So you need to understand which scenario is your requirement. Please go and refer accordingly. Number one. Number two, it provides you a decision tree. Technically, you are not clear which solution I should take for my data movement. Whether I should be using a storage mover or Azure file share or Azure data factory, right? Or a storage migration service or an AZ copy. I'm just giving an example, right? So which solution you need to select at what time? There are decision tree, which is very easily handy to refer. Even in the compute service, whether you want to take it to VM, you want to take it to container, or you should modernize it completely. Serverless, for example, right? So that kind of a decision tree is available. Every section will give you a recommendation, best practices, and downloadable templates for you to go through this journey. Okay. Then people who work on the infrastructure background will understand, or even the non-infrastructure. most of the time we need to present an architecture diagram. CAF will provide you a ready, available visual architecture diagram, a reference architecture diagram. All that you need to do is you need to go there, search. If it is already published, you can download that as a visual, make edit of it, and you can start using it. Okay. The last point is the key benefit. Every module also have an assessment. You can log into that assessment. There will be questionnaires. You keep answering them, and it will give you a score where you need to improve. For example, strategy. You go there, sign in for that assessment. It will start asking you questions. Keep answering those questions. Okay. Now let me take you through quickly to a couple of them that I spoke about. For example, okay. So this is the landing page for Cloud Option Framework. You could see get started, then there are different modules: strategy, plan, ready, migrate, innovate, secure, manage, and govern. Okay. Now all that I'm going to do is I'm going to click on get started. Okay. And this is the point that we spoke about, scenarios. See, there are multiple different scenarios. Now let's take an example of AI adoption. It gives you how should you adopt an AI for your company, right? Then we spoke about let me go back. Sources, tools, and templates. You can see in every phase what are the different resources that are available in a single page. Okay. I'll go back to slides. Any questions before we get into each module? We'll take some examples of each module. What are the different phases within the module, right? If time permits, probably we'll cover all of them, right? If not, we'll have a follow-up session. But then let me tell you, for those who are from the cloud adoption kind of a role, we have planned for multiple sessions where we were going to get into a hands-on session as well for a couple of them.
Do you have any about existing infrastructure? Like if you are using on-premises firewall, like equivalent capability, we have something in Azure itself, something to compare.
Yes. Yes. There are options available where if you go into a ready module, inside that there is an option called landing zone. Inside that there are options of network topology, and that will give you how an Azure firewall, what are the different capabilities of Azure firewall that you can utilize. Now, let's get into a quick strategy kind of an option, which I've already spoke about. Assessing your strategy, you're going to define your motivation and everything. Now, if you are the solution architect, you are the one who are going to start the journey of cloud in your company. What are the kind of questions that you need to ask, understand about your company before you even start doing an adoption of a cloud? Okay, so these are a couple of questions that I highlighted based on the experience. You need to understand who you are. I mean, when you're going to the company, you need to understand which company it is, right? What is the nature of the business? You need to understand their priorities, their pain points, their challenges, their operational challenges, right? What are their 3 years plan, 5 years plan? Correct? One of the important thing I would say is you need to understand who are the key stakeholders, and you need to hear their voices. One of the very common challenges of cloud adoption is misalignment. The executive wants to go to cloud, but then the one level down do not want to go to cloud. You go to a meeting, you talk to them, you ask them, all right, I'm here to understand your application. What is the functionality of your application? We are here to move you to the cloud. And the response is, we are not ready. We don't want to go. We still have a lot of things to do, right? And probably we'll do this after 6 months. But then you have a timeline to complete it, correct? So these are kind of questions which will help you, which will understand your customer better, understand your customer's strategy better, and the experienced solution architect plays a role to guide the customer to build the strategy. Clear enough? Right? Any question on these questions? Now, while you have these questions, now Cloud Adoption Framework also provides you see, a ready-made template. This is what I want to do, take you through to a sample templates. This is a ready-made Word template that is available, which you can pick up for a reference point of view. Of course, you will work on it to improve it more based on the requirement, and you start talking to your customer, you start documenting your strategy, your business outcomes, and everything. Okay. So this is a sample outcome which I wanted to show to everyone, like how would a strategy outcome document will look like. Of course, this is not an end-to-end strategy outcome, but I've just taken key samples, key highlights, which anyone would want to, discuss and understand. Like what is the scenario that we are trying to, what is the problem that we are trying to solve? What kind of a scenario that the customer is going through? And then as an outcome, we have agreed we will take the ERP system into an IaaS. We'll take the web app into a PaaS services, Oracle DB. Okay, let's keep it back in the on-premise itself. What are the governance risks that we want to follow? There are GDPR that we want to follow. What's the budget of the customer? There's a budget of $2 million investment over 3 years that they want to, they have to complete this. Then we sit with them, we plan the roadmap. Quarter 2, Quarter 3, Quarter 4. Now, all of these are ready. We also need to assess the readiness in terms of a people. Do we already have the right skill set in the company, or we need to train them? Correct? So that's a team that we need to start thinking about, because end of the day, all of these content which is on the paper need to be executed on the ground. So you need cloud engineers, you need cloud architect, right? You need automation engineer, you need network architects. How do you train? Are you going to train them, hire them, contract them, give it to some other big companies to come and do it for you? You need to start thinking about those strategies. Any questions, sir, again, before I go to the next one? Yeah.
Could you explain a bit more about how the alignment for ISO and GDPR works in the cloud framework?
Sure. So, for example, if I'm talking about a customer of Qatar, there's a data protection law that we cannot keep. I'm talking about for the companies that we're working for, right? We cannot keep the data outside of the Qatar region. Okay. Same applies to Europe as well, that we cannot keep the data outside of the European region. So now what happens is when we are designing a cloud, we need to ensure the regions where the data is going to reside has to be, for example, Qatar, it has to be within the Qatar center. Now I'll tell you a typical challenge. By understanding the customer required to follow the GDPR law, that means in Qatar, if they have to follow, if I'm designing the cloud for them, in terms of a paired region, there's no paired region for Qatar, right? So Qatar Central is a single region in this geography. In that scenario, then we need to start thinking about being a single region, how are we going to design? That means we'll have to go with an availability zone. There's an option called availability zone in Azure. So I'm talking from a customer's requirement. Okay, they have to go through a GDPR. That means I cannot take data to UAE. I cannot take data to Europe. Right? Any other question? Yeah.
Regarding org readiness, I would also add we had a problem once where the app itself is not ready, or the program that we had was not ready for moving to the cloud. And it also needs some changes in the app, aside from training as well. So that's
We'll come into the next slide. We're talking about changes in the app itself, right?
before deploying to the cloud, we had to change the existing code because it was.
I got your point. I got it. Yeah. So his point is, before going to the cloud, the app might also need to have some changes, right? And we are covering that into our next piece. Any other question on this particular outcome?
For the some of the management planes, still it might not be available locally. Like the Entra ID tenant or the Microsoft M365 tenant. If you go to the location property, it still shows some.
No, the one that you're talking about is a global service. Now there are services which are regional based. And if you're talking about GDPR, there will be services where the data is related to.
It's like the management plane or some the control planes, there will be different.
That's okay. For example, if I'm talking about Azure front door, for the people those who are already working on Azure, right? For example, if I'm talking about Azure front door, it's a global service. You cannot tell Microsoft like bring it for me only in Qatar region. That's not, in fact, that's not something which is going to store your data. We're only talking about a service which stores your data. Okay. So this is what I was talking about. Every module will have an assessment. Okay. Please ensure that when you are referring to a cloud adoption framework, you also go through different assessments. Now your strategy is built. What's next? Can anyone help me? What was next in our framework slide?
Plan.
All right. So let's plan. So plan. What do we do with the plan? The first thing is so how do we plan? Forget about cloud. How do we plan?
Assess where we are now, where we want to go and define.
This is exact what I was looking for. Forget about cloud, right? Even if you're planning for a travel journey, how would you plan? First thing is you will assess how many people are trying to travel, right? Then you will think about, okay, how are we going to travel? Correct? You'll plan the dates. You'll plan the hotel where we're going to land, right? You'll plan who's going to drive. You'll plan about the fuel backup. Correct? So same thing here. You're going to plan, but then in plan, the first thing, as he rightly said, assess what we have. That is called a digital estate. The digital estate is an assessment of your organization IT infrastructure. Okay? From an application, from a network, from security, from authentication, from database, from all of these different aspects. Right? And then while you are assessing that, you also need to do an org alignment. There is also a guide, there is also guidance on org alignment. Now, from an executive C-level discussions, you made the strategy, you've understood, all right, we're going to cloud, 70%, 60% or 80% is going to Azure, 20% is going to stay back, or in a multi-cloud environment, 20% going to another public cloud. All of these strategies built, but then you need to align with your other departments, which is very, very important. Okay, so how do we align is part of a plan section. The last point is other than the skill readiness, the last point is the cloud adoption plan itself, that's where you're going to define, all right, first month, second month, third month is going to be completely an assessment. Then landing zone, then migration. Okay, we'll look some of the samples. First thing, in terms of plan, how do we initiate it? There are two options in terms of plan. One is you can go to market, you can go to Microsoft. There are tools available which can help us to assess the environment, right? In terms of Microsoft, there's an option called Azure Migrate, okay, which will perform an discovery of your entire IT infrastructure, okay, and it will produce a result with whether it is ready to go to cloud or it is ready to go to cloud with few changes or not ready to go to cloud. I'm just throwing example. Okay, there are multiple options too. It will also assess your VM, application, database, all of these aspects. It will assess even the network communication, complexities like cluster. Okay. Now, along with that tool-based assessment, what we actually perform. Now, I'm explaining a journey of a company which need to adopt a cloud. Strategy is completed. Now we are going to the actual on-ground work, right? So along with the tool, while the tool is running, we also need to start talking to the application owner. We also need to start talking to the different departments. This is where I said we need to start align. We need to talk to them. We need to have workshop with them, right? We need to give them questionnaires to answer, right? You want to share anything, Abdullah, on this?
Yeah, see, your assessment phase or the planning phase is more of the documentation part. See, you have to document each and everything, every aspect of your application lifecycle to ensure you are looking at every, every side of the applications to plan better, to migrate, to be able to ensure that the final outcome, you are able to, define the final outcome. So for an example, right, I'll just give you an example of one application, the level of steps that we go through normally to do an assessment. Now consider there's an application on premise and we want to migrate this application to Azure, right? So how do we document this? See, like here it is mentioned tool-based and manual-based, right? So there are two ways, or rather two options to begin with, right? One is tool-based. You need to understand what are the servers involved for that application, right? You need to have a list of servers that are responsible for that application. What you do, you take these servers and you feed these servers into the assessment tool. What does the tool do? Tool will capture your incoming and outgoing traffic from that server. It will capture your softwares installed on the server. It will capture in the hardware configuration of your server, right? Which will be used later for to plan your cloud adoption. That is tool. So you leave that running. Second thing, manual based assessment. So here what you do, you go and speak to the application owner. You first of all you provide your basic questionnaire to the application team so that they can fill that information before they come to you, and you can have a better understanding. Now, what do you have in this questionnaire? So there are basically different types of information, like general information about. First is you document about the business of that application. For example, in general, right? What is the cost center of this application, for an example? Then you also get general information about server, right? Server name, whether it's having a DR, whether it's active, passive, what is the database type, what is the backend database it is using, and then the next could be that network the interfaces, right? So as an application team, they would know what are the minimum interface required for this application to function, and any other dependencies that you want to probably and see, as you progress, I'll tell you, based on our experience, the first application you begin with, you may not know exactly what to ask for also. You may know the generic questions, but then each organization is different and their requirements are different. So as you progress with this particular approach, you keep on improving your questionnaire every time. And then once you document this information will then be, you take the information out of the tool, you identify what are these dependencies in inbound and outbound interfaces. you define what are the rules required when you move your application to cloud. Because at the end of the day, your application should be able to communicate with different interfaces to be able to successfully move from one place to another. So that's how the overall approach is. I mean, I just gave you a very high level approach, but then this information is then basically used to identify the approaches. Right? It can be a rehost based on the information you capture, you define, right? Whether it is easy to lift and shift the application, or whether it requires a re-architect, or whether it has to be refactored, whether it can go to some past services. So, in that sense.
Now that we have understood about complexity, understood about the readiness of our environment, and we have also selected the different R factor here, as sir you mentioned, we had to make some changes into the application, or maybe a low code change. It will go into a refactor, a heavy code change, which will go into a re-architect. So these are the solutions that we need to start building, understanding during the time of assessment phase. Along with that, while we know the environment, now this is where we get into the cloud adoption plan, as in a plan, right? What and when we are going to do, and that is also readily available for us as a guidance. There is an Azure DevOps demo generator. You can make a note of it if you want to download it. It will give you a ready-made, complete end-to-end project plan for you on a cloud adoption journey. It's provided by Microsoft again. Now it will give you a complete sample reference template. Take it up, make changes, add your realistic dates, add your realistic environment into it. Maybe it is not talking about Citrix. You need to add a line item for Citrix, for example, and here you go. We've got a plan ready. And that too on an Azure DevOps, because people have stopped using MPP and most of them have moved to Azure DevOps for a migration kind of a project. So you have a migration template, as in migration plan template. This one has a GitHub. Well, I'll check. Any questions, sir? Plan? All right. Now actually we are getting into more hands-on. The first one was from a business perspective. Second one was from a assessment perspective, right? The strategy and then assessment. Now we're getting more technical. Got a plan. Now I need to understand where am I going to land. Okay. Now if I have to land, how is that going to be a guided, best practice followed environment? Okay. So there is a guide available. How do we start from the scratch? Imagine there's nothing, there's no cloud. Your customer or your company or my company have not onboarded to the cloud. And now technically, I wanted to purchase subscription. I wanted to become registered with Microsoft. How do we start? Right from the agreement signing to the Entra ID to management group, subscriptions, all of them. Okay. Along with the best practices, there's a guideline. This is what a solution architect follow, a base guideline. Now, if I'm trying to design the environment, what are my key decision area? Right? So you begin with your enrollment and then your Azure AD tenant. Then you define identity access management. Who will have what kind of a role into the Azure subscription? Right? What kind of a permission into the Azure subscription? Then you go ahead and actually create the management groups and subscriptions. You want to have multiple subscriptions. You want to keep everything into a single subscription. Then you move on to a network topology. You want to keep hub and spoke topology. You want to keep mesh topology of a network. Then you move on into all of those Azure network services, load balancer, front door, traffic manager, private link, all of them are covered under network topology. Then you go to, management and monitoring. You ensure there is a business continuity over there with the disaster recovery. You onboard the security throughout the journey. And the last point is, how do you automate that? How do you bring DevOps into it? This is the design guide. Believe me, any Azure service, in terms of, I'm talking from a design perspective, any Azure service you would want to design, you go to the ready section. I showed you the landing page of cloud adoption framework. You click on ready, expand it, then you just need to know how to navigate there. You will get a best practices. You will get a recommendation. Okay. And not only that, this design guide will also talk about, if you are a small customer, you pick this. If you're an enterprise customer, you pick this. Now, along with the design guide, the ready will also provide you a guidance of how to implement it. It's not only about how you design it, it will also provide you a guidance of how to implement it. Now, it will give you an option whether you want to deploy the entire landing zone using Terraform or using Bicep, or now recently there are Azure verified modules which are coming up, right? So those options as a code as completely available into a CAF modules. All that you need to know is what is the service that I want to install or I want to implement. Any questions? So this is a sample reference. I know it's very small, but this is a sample reference architecture diagram. Is it visible now?
Yes.
See, you name a service, it will be there from an infrastructure point of view. Okay. Now, the best part of cloud adoption framework is, this is a very common question that I get from my colleague, most of my friends, when they are trying to adopt the cloud adoption journey. Like, I'm trying to design, but I need some references. And this again I've taken from a cloud adoption framework. I hope it is visible. Suppose if I want to hub and spoke, okay, to the virtual van. Click on it. There's a detailed article, right? And the video file, download it.
It's a ready sample architecture for you. Start using it, start building on top of it.
How much time did it take? You need to know what architecture diagram that you're looking out for, search for it. If there is a readily available, download and make changes. Your reference is available. Any question on ready?
the different template for the like product-based company or enterprise companies? Let's say.
So if we look at from a landing zone perspective, the entire landing zone perspective, there is a different reference architecture for a small scale, for an enterprise customer, that is available. Similar architecture is available for AI. Architecture is available for, if you're going for an Azure, AVS solutions, it's available. There's been a good progress throughout this year. There have been a lot of repositories that have been, added into a Microsoft collection, which is very, very useful. Believe me, we go to a customer, we talk to them, we want to understand about their environment, then we'll have to present to them how your environment will look like in cloud. We go to this reference architecture to start building their vision. Now you have the landing zone. Next is adopt. Now adopt, this is an example that I wanted to show to you about the decision tree. This is a kind of a decision tree that will be available for you throughout on various different topics in Cloud Adoption Framework. Now you don't know, you have done the assessment, you know the environment, right? You know the strategy, you know the complexity. Now how do you take it forward? You know the landing zone is also deployed. Now whether you want to migrate, whether you want to modernize or innovate, there has to be some decision tree. Okay, so using these framework, using this experience, using the decision tree, you can start building out your actual migration or modernization. Okay, this is a sample decision tree I wanted to show. Any question on this? We're going to have a detailed technical session on Azure Migrate, where we will be talking about a live sessions on how do we technically perform the assessment, technically perform the migration, what are their compatibility, what are the requirements, how a Azure Migrate agent will be installed to an on-prem VM, discovery process. There's a session coming on that, where we will be going in detail for that. I'll move on to govern. Okay, the first thing is you build a team who is going to govern. Because without a team, if you don't understand who is going to govern this environment, cloud is very dangerous. Believe me, at the start of the cloud journey, there have been a lot of failures where people didn't know what to do. They've given access to everyone in the company, and anyone can go and create any service that they want. People have started using premium disks. They were not sure, they were not aware what kind of a cost effect or cost impact that it is going to bring. Finally, end of the month, when someone came to look at their cost sheet, that's when they realized. So while the cloud is very much flexible for everyone to use it from a browser, it is also dangerous if there is no governance in place. It's highly important. Okay, so for you to have a governance, you need to have a governance team, and they need to keep assessing the cloud risk. All right, and that is also available in a Microsoft CAF itself, that what are the different lenses, what are the different governance disciplines that you need to follow to avoid those cloud risks, which we are going to look into the next slide. Of course, when you get into your customer, you understand their different business risks. Okay, for example, we talked about GDPR, we talked about Qatar Central as a single region, right? That means we will also have to implement an Azure policy that no one creates a VM or a storage account which is other than Qatar Central region. Correct? So that's a policy that we need to implement. That's a governance that we need to implement. We cannot just send an email to someone and say like, okay, just use Qatar Central, don't use any other region. No one is going to follow. Believe me. We have to implement that Azure policy that no VM with an public IP address. Of course, with an exception of certain VM and network team, which will take an cybersecurity approval. Okay, so We understand the business risk. We convert those risks into how we align with an Azure policy. There's a long list of Azure policies that are available. We convert them to control them, and then we implement the process. So what are the different disciplines? Cost, security, resource consistency, identity, and deployment acceleration. Now, I don't need to explain cost. We all are aware, right, how important the cost is, right? And cost can also, I've also seen experience that cost have also fired employees because they were not aware what they're doing, right? They ended up with a very big bill and they had to lose a job. So very dangerous. Please, you can play with anything else, but not with the cost. So you have to be very clear if you're working on cloud, what service are you selecting, what price impact that is going to come. And one of the best option is you implement, you restrict everything from an Azure policy perspective. Now, for people, those who work on compute, I would only select D series to deploy, not the M series, right? That's a governance policy that I would implement. Okay, going to a security baseline, of course, from a security point of view, no public IP address, right? Resource consistency. If I'm creating a virtual machine or a virtual network or a storage account, there should be certain naming conventions, which is easy to organize them, which is easy to identify them. There has to be tags applied on them. Similarly, the identity baseline, we need to know if there are 100 people in the company, there will be few people who will have a contributor right. Some should only have a reader right. Not everyone should have a contributor right. Okay. Deployment acceleration, of course, bringing up your automation kind of a template, Terraform or Bicep, all of them, or you want to use PowerShell for that matter. So these are different lenses that we need to apply, and these are different tools that we can use in each of these areas. I'm talking about the native tools. Of course, there are third-party tools also available. Okay. We have two more sections to cover. One is manage and then secure. We'll ensure that we completed another 5 to 8 minutes. Yeah, any questions? Because I know it's already 7:30.
Yes, before we move outside of governance, one of the main aspects as well of governance is data classification. If my data is public, I need to define my data before I migrate it to cloud. If it's public, if it's internal, if it's confidential, if it's sensitive, and each data classification has its own controls. I need to encrypt it. I need to do access review. So beside the governance, beside the cost can terminate people. Data classification that's insecure can also terminate people, by the way. So just speaking on the governance part.
I completely agree with you. That's a very important point, that security can also terminate people. And it's not about terminating people, but then it's about all of those governance parameters that we talked about is very highly important in any organization. Agree with you. Okay. So I'll quickly take you through about plan. Now you understand plan. I'll make a typo here. It's manage. So manage is an ongoing operations. Yeah.
It's still preparing. And it will take another 30 minutes. So take your time.
Okay.
Well,
Thank you.
to talk.
I thought it's already 7:30. All right. We can discuss them in detail. Anyone from an operations background here? Yes, sir. So how do you manage?
No, the main challenge it comes around like like if the application or like the infrastructure being the architecture are like evaluated by the different consultants or the different team. When we join the company, like it will be completely new for us. We will be in the middle of the stage, whether we need to re-architect or we need to go with that flow. That decision we need to make. And the other thing is the tagging perspective. Like so, they will create it as a whatever the name want. Like we couldn't able to understand. Like if you go to the production subscription, then we will be having like resource with the name of dev test. So first we need to have that the tagging strategy, and as well as the identity perspective. Like are we going to use like the Entra ID as authentication source, because some of the legacy applications don't support like the SAML authentication or OAuth. Like there will be a that will be a main challenge. Again, we need to plan for the identity perspective, and also the thing is like some of the legacy applications still supports only the NTLM and Kerberos. So first we need to understand, make that application to support the authentication with the different IDP providers. So those kind of challenges, and as well as the logging part, like when we migrate and assess, we don't know like what are the logs we need to show. Like even when we run an assessment, like the event log itself, it will comes around 800 GB. Like we
So what do you do? How do you try to come out of this challenge?
no, the like still like
Have you ever referred CAF?
yeah, we refer the cap. That's what I'm referring. Like it was referred by the previous the architects or like the previous team, so they might have implemented something, but like most of the things like when we switch to a new job, we have that kind of challenges. Like
So see, I'll give you experience. Like now you're talking about an onboarding to a new role, right? See, well, first thing is my experience. If you're onboarding to a new environment and you're talking about managing the entire Azure environment, I would say the first thing you should look at is Azure Advisor. Into your Azure environment, there is an option called Azure Advisor, and Azure Advisor will give you different impact related recommendations, whether it is a low impact recommendation, medium impact recommendation, or high impact recommendation. Please try and fix your high impact recommendation as a first priority, right? Azure Advisor performs a regular scan of your environment. It will throw you different recommendations in terms of cost, security, reliability, performance, in all of these different aspects. Right? If you're able to capture and bring your score of your environment, minimum of 70, 75 plus percentage, that means you are in a good control of the environment. Right? And most of the time, as your advisor, the recommendation will also take you back to cloud adoption framework, to a recommendation and best practices. Right?
also like about the cloud posture management, like so that will also will be provided by the Azure Advisor.
Yes. Yes. Right.
Now, all the best practices actually, if you start following it, right, you will definitely improve your overall posture of the cloud.
Okay. Now, in terms of coming back to quick to complete our manage environment, right? Manage is an ongoing job. Please understand that it's not a job that you perform. Now, for example, assessment, you perform the discovery for 1 month, your assessment is over. You perform the migration for a certain application workload, your migration is over. Correct? But manage is not something that you perform for this month and you say that's over, that's done. No. From the start, when you start your journey of cloud, of actually onto the technically on cloud, manage is something which has to be followed. Keep the lights on. Now, manage, recently Cloud Adoption Framework have converted their module into a different phases within manage. They call it as, Microsoft call it as RAM. Okay. Now, what do we call RAM? Is ready operations, administered Azure, monitor operations, protect Azure. Okay. So this helps us on a structured format when we try and navigate to these different environments about how are you going to manage the cost, how are you going to manage the compliance, manage data, manage your code deployment. There are best practices, there are templates available. Okay, so start from ready. You need to ensure your operation SLAs are being set, your operational teams are set, what kind of tool that you're going to use, okay? Then how you're going to use. Then you actually monitor. What are the different parameters that you need to monitor them? Correct? And then you actually go with a protect kind of information. Now, protect comes more from an aspect of a reliability in terms of your manage as in CAF, right? Do you have an availability zone? Do you have an availability set, right? Do you have a backup enable? Okay, from all of this perspective. In fact, from a management point of view, I would always recommend for the people, those who are into an operations environment, again, sir, for you, there's something called well architect framework. All right. Now, cloud adoption framework is from a design or adopt perspective. Well architect framework is from a review perspective. Right? If you want to review your design, if you want to review your security, your cost management, your performance, you can go to your operations efficiency. You should use well architect framework.
Mohammed, may I ask a question? The cloud adoption framework, is it when the companies are starting to move to the cloud? Is it applied at that, or is it like a constant thing that needs to happen?
It is a constant thing, and that anyone who wants to use cloud adoption framework based on their current situation, they can jump in and they can start using it. Doesn't mean if the company is already on cloud and then they just realize there is a cloud adoption framework, but then they cannot start it. They can start at any point of time based on their current requirement. But then the cloud adoption framework gives you an end-to-end journey. It gives you a journey from start, which is from start or strategy, plan, ready, all of them. But then you are already in the cloud. You're already migrated to the cloud. Now your environment is there. But still, if you want to optimize it, you want to ensure you go back and look at the best practices of your landing zone environment, of your existing infrastructure, you can refer cloud for CAP for that.
And is there a checklist or something that somebody can check whether these things are already applied, or what are the things that they are missing on, or things like that?
Of course, we at the beginning of the session we discussed about the assessments that are available as in different modules, which are there, which are presented from Microsoft. You can go if you want to assess you're ready. If you want to assess your strategy, if you want to assess any of your phases, there is an assessment readily available from Microsoft Cloud Adoption. It's a long list of questions which you if you keep answering them, that itself will give you confidence. All right, did I miss a step? So that you can go back. It's an iterative process. You can go back and you can perform that. Any other questions?
Any way to compare the operation cost in other cloud providers or like the private clouds, something like that?
Not that in the native tools, right?
Maybe out of the
But then there are tools available. Yes. He's asking about if he wants to compare price of Azure consumption with another public cloud. I'm talking from an option that Microsoft provides. There are option of TCO calculator that if you're in case trying to move from on-prem to Azure, there are option available as a TCO calculator where you can perform a calculation of what are you actually spending at on-prem and what you will be end up spending when you move to Azure, right? There is as a native available as a TCO calculator, but it will give you from a Azure perspective, right? But then from a service perspective, if you're looking at price, there is also an option called Azure pricing calculator, where you can select D series, M series, or any particular service or premium storage account, right? Now, the size of the data that you upload to a particular region, what will be your cost? There is an option to evaluate that aspect. Please ensure that you understand that secure in cloud adoption framework is applicable to all the phases of your cloud adoption framework. Right from the strategy to all the phases, you need to ensure that security is aligned. Okay. And that's why we start with, again, to the start point. We started thinking about a business alignment. All of these framework is there for you to align with your business. the business goals, the business objective to solve the business real problems. Right? So that's where we usually start with. The first and foremost, even the secure, we need to have a business alignment over there. In terms of discipline, these are the different disciplines. You ensure there is an access control, security operation, asset protection, security governance, and innovation in your security. Okay. We also take having a individual services what is needed in each of these disciplines. Okay. But then when it comes to security, we are also planning to have a detailed session of an hour, which will only talk about cloud security, especially Azure security I'm talking. Okay. These are some couple of native tool services that you can utilize for Azure security services. So, sir, your question in terms of the security, right? Please ensure that you refer to your Azure Advisor Secure Score. That is also mentioned there.
So, Kasim, one question.
Sure.
So, when you say establish zero trust access model, what do you mean by zero trust in terms of security?
It's a least privilege. For example, I'll say you don't trust anyone or you don't give access to anyone unless it is really needed. Now, zero trust itself is a complete framework, right? And that framework helps us to understand in each of these services what is the level of access that we need to provide and what should be an eligibility criteria for them to have an access. Right?
Basically, just to add on to what he said, you just assume everything is a breach, trust nothing, and then you go from there. That's zero trust.
So, is it also within the organization, or
Yes, of course. You don't trust anyone.
You don't trust yourself.
Yeah. That's why even the admins are not like privilege accounts. They should not be all the time with the privilege account because mistakes can even happen. And that's why like the internal risk is the most highest one.
That's why you're constantly like verifying, even though it's annoying, you constantly have to do like MFA, go through the authenticator, you just assume everything is breached. That's one of the ways to establish zero trust.
The last part is, which I've already talked about, the well-architected framework. Because it also have different pillars like cost, operation, performance, reliability, and security, right? It will help you to evaluate, review all of your design, your implementation, your operations, your high availability, and all of those aspects. Okay, that's it from a slide perspective. We'll keep the forum open from any question. Let it be any questions on cloud option framework.
So, Mohammed, the first question is from my side. Since we have some fresh graduates here, what is or where is the startup point for this cloud adoption framework? Where they can start for the fresh graduates?
Okay. There's an option of Microsoft Learn. Microsoft Learn have a module of cloud adoption framework where people can register themselves. Let me bring that up. So this is an option for you to start learning the skill of cloud adoption framework. So when you click on it, it will give you an option if you want to select phase by phase, module by module. And there is an also option. There's also an option if you're a beginner, you can select the beginner module. If you're advanced or intermediate, based on that, you can select the appropriate module for you to learn. So we'll keep the forum open. Is there any questions? If no, then we can ask questions. Right?
Mohammed, and I will stop the streaming.
Thank you.
And we'll start.